I need to tell you something before this story begins. I need to tell you that I almost did not go. Not almost in the dramatic sense of someone standing at a crossroads with the weight of a decision pressing down on them. Almost in the quiet sense. The specific, ordinary almost of someone who has set an alarm for 6:30 and who lies awake at 6:28 wondering whether the thing they have decided is the thing they should have decided. I lay awake at 6:28 on a Monday morning in September. I was 20 years old. The recruiting office opened at 8. I had an appointment at 8:15. And I was lying in the bed in the apartment I shared with my roommate Claire in Fayetteville, North Carolina, staring at the ceiling and wondering whether the person who had made this appointment 3 weeks ago had understood something that the person lying here now did not. The alarm went off at 6:30. I got up. Not because I had resolved the wondering. Because I had decided, somewhere in the 6 months before this morning, that the wondering was not a signal to stop. It was a signal that the thing mattered. Things that matter make you wonder. Things that do not matter do not. I got up. I showered. I put on the clothes I had laid out the night before, jeans, a white shirt, the specific, considered casualness of someone who has thought about what to wear to an appointment that is going to determine the shape of the next several years. I made coffee. I stood at the window of the apartment and I watched Fayetteville wake up. Fort Bragg is visible from certain parts of Fayetteville. I had grown up 40 minutes away from Fort Bragg. I had grown up, my entire life, in the proximity of something that I had never fully looked at directly. That morning I looked at it directly. Then I picked up my keys. And I drove to the recruiting office. My name is Maya Carter. I am 20 years old. And this is the story of the decision that changed everything. Not the decision to enlist, though that is part of it. The decision to become someone specific. Not just a soldier. Not just an army officer in training. But the specific person I needed to become so that the life I was going to build would be worth the building. I did not know that was the decision I was making on that Monday morning in September. I understand it now. This is the story of how I came to understand it. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. My mother's name is Patricia Carter. She is 52 years old. She spent 27 years as a registered nurse before a back injury forced her to change roles and she became a nursing educator, teaching the next generation of nurses with the specific, practical wisdom of someone who has spent 2 decades seeing what actually matters at a bedside. She is the most competent person I have ever known. Not in the impressive, performative way. In the specific, quiet way of someone who has been in rooms where things were going wrong and who has known what to do in those rooms and has done it without requiring anyone to acknowledge that she knew. She raised me alone. My father left when I was 3. Not dramatically. He simply found a different life and moved toward it. He was not cruel about the leaving. He was just gone. In the specific way that some people are gone, present enough in the early years that the absence has a shape, then absent enough that the shape becomes the thing and the person becomes secondary. I grew up with the shape of him. I grew up watching my mother be competent in the absence of anyone else. I grew up understanding that the thing you can depend on is the thing you build yourself. The Army was the most structured version of that understanding I had ever encountered. I want to tell you about the 6 months before the Monday morning. Not because they were dramatic. They were not dramatic. They were the specific, undramatic 6 months of someone who is working a job that is insufficient for what she needs and who is looking for the shape of something that fits better. I was waitressing at a restaurant in downtown Raleigh that was nice enough that the tips were good and that required enough energy that the days felt full without feeling meaningful. Full and meaningful are different things. I had full. I did not have meaningful. I was also taking 2 classes at the community college. Not toward a degree, toward something I could not name yet. I was taking classes the way you read sometimes, not for the destination but for the motion. The specific, restless motion of someone who needs to be moving toward something even when they do not know what. One of those classes was American military history. Not because I had ever been particularly interested in military history. Because it fit my schedule and my professor, a retired lieutenant colonel named Dr. James Webb who had 20 years of active service before he transitioned to academia, was, by every account I had heard, the kind of teacher who made the subject matter relevant regardless of what you had previously believed about it. He was. The first day of class Dr. Webb said something that I have thought about almost every day since. He said, "Military history is not the history of wars. It is the history of decisions. Of people, ordinary people, not heroes, people, who were put in positions where what they decided mattered in ways that extended beyond themselves. That is what we are studying. Not battles. Decisions." I wrote that down. Not because I was a diligent note-taker. Because something in that sentence recognized something in me. Decisions that extend beyond yourself. I had been making decisions that extended only to myself for 2 years. I had been waitressing and taking classes and wondering, and none of it extended beyond myself. I wanted something that extended beyond myself. Dr. Webb's class gave me the language for what I had been looking for. After the 3rd class I stayed. I asked him questions. He answered them with the specific, unhurried attention of someone who has learned to recognize when a question is a real question rather than a performed one. After the 5th class he said, "Maya, have you considered service?" I said, "I have been thinking about it." He said, "What is stopping you?" I said, "I do not know what I am capable of." He looked at me. He said, "That is the only honest answer I have ever heard to that question." He said, "Go find out." I drove to the recruiting office on a Monday morning in September. The office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a Subway restaurant. The specific, unremarkable location of something that is about to be significant. I parked. I sat in the car for 4 minutes. Then I went in. The recruiter's name was Staff Sergeant Reeves. She was 31 years old. She was a woman. I had not expected a woman. I do not know what I had expected, the specific image of a recruiting office that movies and television had given me, which was emphatically not a woman in her early 30s with her hair pulled back and a coffee from the Subway next door, and the specific, direct quality of someone who has heard every version of hesitation and is not going to perform patience she does not feel. She looked at me when I walked in. She said, "Maya Carter?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Sit down." I sat. She looked at my paperwork. I had completed the preliminary forms online. She looked at it the way someone looks at something they already know and are confirming rather than learning. Then she looked at me. She said, "You are 20 years old." Yes. "You have 63 college credits." Yes. "You work as a server." Yes. And you want to enlist? I want to learn more about enlisting, I said carefully. She looked at me. She said, no, you do not. I looked back at her. You want to enlist, she said. You have already decided. You are here to confirm the decision, not to learn more. I held her gaze. She was right. I said, yes. She said, then let us stop pretending you have not decided and talk about what you are actually deciding. She put down the folder. She leaned back in her chair. She said, tell me why. I said, because I want something that extends beyond myself. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, Dr. Webb send you? I said, he suggested I come. She said, he sends me 2 or 3 every semester. His are always the ones who know what they want and do not know they know it yet. She opened the folder again. His are also, she said, the ones who do well. She looked up. Tell me about your mother. I told her about my mother. Not because I understood immediately why she was asking. Because the question felt right in the way that right questions feel, like they are pointing at something real rather than gathering information. I told her about Patricia Carter. About the 2 jobs and the 1 parent and the back injury and the pivot to teaching. About the competence that did not require acknowledgement. About the shape of my father's absence and what the shape had taught me. Staff Sergeant Reeves listened. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she said, your mother taught you that the thing you can depend on is the thing you build yourself. I said, yes. She said, the Army is going to teach you the same thing. But it is going to teach it in a way that is different from watching your mother do it. Different how? I said. She said, because in the Army the thing you are building is not just yourself. It is the capacity to be depended on by other people. It is the specific, particular skill of being the person that other people can count on when the counting matters most. She leaned forward. That is different from building yourself, she said. Self-building is internal. What I am describing is external. Relational. It requires you to extend beyond yourself in the specific way you described. I looked at her. You are exactly what we are looking for, she said. I said, how do you know? She said, because you used the word extend. Most people come in here and say they want to serve their country, or they want the benefits, or they want structure. They do not say extend. That word tells me something. What does it tell you? I said. She said, that you already understand the thing most people take years to learn. I left the recruiting office 2 hours after I arrived. I had a packet of information. I had a follow-up appointment for the following Thursday. I had the specific, settled quality of someone who has confirmed what they already knew. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the strip mall between the nail salon and the subway, and I called my mother. She answered on the 2nd ring. She said, how did it go? I said, I am going to enlist. She was quiet. Not the long quiet of someone who is surprised. The short quiet of someone who has been expecting something and is receiving it. She said, I know. I said, you know? I have known since you started that military history class, she said. Possibly before. I said, why did you not say anything? She said, because it was not my decision to make. And because I needed you to arrive at it the way you arrived at it, through the wondering, not around it. I held the phone. Are you okay with it? I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I am proud of you. I have always been proud of you. I am also afraid. Both of those things are true, and I am not going to pretend only one of them is real. I said, I am afraid too. She said, I know. That is how I know you understand what you are doing. A pause. Maya, she said. What? The thing you said, about extending beyond yourself. Did you say that to the recruiter? Yes. Good, she said. That is the truest thing you know about yourself right now. Hold on to it. It is going to matter more than you understand yet. I enlisted on a Thursday in October. 14 days after the Monday morning in September. Staff Sergeant Reeves processed the paperwork. She shook my hand at the end. She said, Carter. I said, Staff Sergeant. She said, the wondering does not stop. I want you to know that. Not when you complete basic. Not when you get your first assignment. Not after your first deployment. The wondering is what tells you the thing still matters. I said, does it still matter to you? She looked at me. Every day, she said. Is that hard? I said. She said, yes. Is it worth it? I said. She said, every day. She shook my hand again. She said, go become someone. I left the recruiting office for the second time. I drove to my mother's house. She had cooked dinner. The specific, ordinary dinner of a Tuesday evening, rice and chicken and something green that she always included because she has always believed that something green at dinner is non-negotiable. We sat at the kitchen table. The same kitchen table where I had done homework for 12 years. Where she had helped me with essays and explained fractions and listened to the specific complaints of every stage of adolescence with the specific, patient attention of someone who understood that being listened to was sometimes more important than being solved. We ate. We did not talk about the enlistment, not specifically. We talked about other things. Her students. My roommate Claire. A television show she had started watching. At the end of dinner she cleared the plates. I sat at the table. She came back and she sat across from me. She looked at me for a moment. Then she reached across the table and she covered my hand with both of hers. She said, I need to tell you something. I said, tell me. She said, I have spent 20 years making sure you did not need anyone. Making sure you could handle things. Making sure that the shape of your father's absence did not become a shape you carried into everything. I have spent 20 years building your independence. She looked at me. I may have built it too well, she said. Because the thing the Army is going to ask of you is not independence. It is interdependence. The ability to need people and to let people need you and to understand that needing is not weakness. I looked at my mother. I need to know, she said, that you understand that. I thought about it. I thought about Staff Sergeant Reeves and extending beyond yourself. I thought about Dr. Webb and decisions that extend beyond yourself. I thought about the shape of my father's absence and what I had built around it. I said. I am still learning that. My mother nodded. Good, she said. Learning is the right place to be. She squeezed my hands. I love you, she said. I am proud of you. I am afraid for you. And I believe in you. She said all four of those things in a single sentence. Not choosing among them. All of them. Simultaneously. Thank you, Mom, I said. She said, come home when they let you. I said, I will come home when they let me. She said, and when they do not let you, come home anyway. I laughed. She laughed. We sat at the kitchen table for another hour after that. Just being at the table. I want to tell you something about the walk to my car that night. It was October. The specific, cooling quality of a North Carolina October evening, not cold yet, but no longer summer, the particular in-between that smells like leaves and something ending. I walked to my car. I stopped before I got in. I stood in my mother's driveway and I looked up. The sky was the specific, deep blue of an October evening in North Carolina, not black yet, still holding the last light. I stood there for a long time. I was thinking about what I had done. Not second-guessing, I want to be precise. Not undoing the wondering but standing inside the decision and letting it be real. I had enlisted. In 4 months I was going to report to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic combat training. In 8 months I was going to be a soldier. In a year I was going to be someone I could not yet fully see. I stood in the driveway and I let all of that be true. Then I thought about something Staff Sergeant Reeves had said. Go become someone. I was already someone. But I was going to become a different version of that someone. A version that extended beyond herself. A version that had been built in the Army's specific, uncompromising, demanding environment rather than in the waiting tables and the community college classes and the 6:28 a.m. wondering. I was ready. Not in the feeling ready sense. In the committed to the becoming sense. Which is the only readiness that actually counts. I got in the car. I drove home to the apartment. Claire was asleep. I sat in the kitchen of our apartment and I took out a piece of paper, not a notebook, a piece of paper, the specific physical act of handwriting something that matters, and I wrote a letter. To myself. Not a dramatic letter. Not a list of goals or a statement of purpose. A simple letter. It said, Maya. You are going to forget things. You are going to forget the 6:28 a.m. wondering and the October driveway and the thing your mother said about needing. You are going to forget because the thing you are going into will require so much of your present that the past will recede. When it recedes, when you cannot remember why you started, come back to this. You started because you wanted something that extended beyond yourself. And you were right to want it. And you are right to go find it. Keep going. I folded the letter. I put it in an envelope. I wrote on the outside, open when you forget why. I put it in my bag. I have carried it since. I have not opened it. Not because I have not forgotten. Because every time I have come close to forgetting, something has reminded me before I had to open the envelope. A morning at basic training that was harder than I believed possible. A letter from my mother. A moment in a deployment that cost something real and that also, in the specific, complex accounting of sacrifice, produced something real. A person I led who trusted me. A decision I made that extended beyond myself. Every time I have come close to opening the envelope, something has closed the gap before I needed to. I keep the letter. I keep it in case the something stops coming. It has not stopped yet. This is episode 1. The beginning. There are 9 more parts to this story. The man who was waiting when I came back from basic training. The first deployment and what it did to both of us. The children we had in between the things the Army required. The letter I never sent. The night everything changed. The coming home that was harder than the leaving. The thing I could not say. What the Army took. And what it gave back. Stay with me. It is worth staying for. Drop the word begin in the comments if this story reached something real in you. Begin for where this started. Begin for the Monday morning at 6:28. Begin for every decision that felt too large until you made it and discovered it was exactly the right size. Subscribe. Because episode 2 is coming. And the man who was waiting deserves his own story. Kayla's dark truth.